Some of you eagle-eyed viewers out there might have noticed that Phoenix King has been running under the nickname Dwarfs Require No Skill, which is, on face value, pretty hilarious, but has certainly entered him into the great Book of Grudges. Calharmon's going to try and respond in this Game 4 with his Brave Dwarfs. And I will say from the outset, I disagree with that statement. I do think dwarfs require skills, certainly. A lot of people don't appreciate the skills that they do require, which I admit are different from what other factions may require of you. It's a very specific skill set, but let's talk a little bit about it as these armies close in. So the biggest thing with dwarfs is because their units are slow, you have to position them ahead of time, right? You really have to plan your positioning well and have your units where they need to be before they need to be there, because you don't have time to react and get your units into place if you're always reacting to the situation. So you have to play proactively. Target priority is something I've talked a lot about on this channel over the years, but it is super important for the dwarves. You have to be shooting the right target at the right time, which often can be very tricky. And not only that, but controlling your missile units, keeping them out of harm's way while you lack mobility, because that's the biggest drawback of dwarfs, by far their most glaring weakness, and something that certainly is exploitable. Dwarfs are very tough for new players fight against, I think, and that's kind of where their reputation, and oftentimes less skilled players can be very good with them too, but once you get to the higher levels of play, most players will know how to punish dwarfs relatively well. So you need to have those skills of target priority and positioning super crisp if you want to play them competitively in tournaments. Anyway, all that aside here, let's get to the builds as they're already getting in contact. Phoenix King coming in here with his proud High Elves, Imric, and some War Lions, which is definitely a brave choice. He's also got some Lion Infantry as well. Got some Rangers out of the flanks to possibly go after Slayers or Rangers. Rangers are really good against Rangers, it turns out. And Rangers are also good at shooting Rangers, which just makes sense. On the Dwarf side here, we've got Thorek, who you definitely take if you want to win. Miners with blasting charges up front, too. Very nice kind of charge here with War Lions to get in and out to prevent them from throwing their charges. I don't know if they were on fire at will, they might have blasted the Lions, I'm not sure. We've also got plenty of Quarrelers, the Ulthuar's Raiders, and then some more miners in the back, Norgrimling's Ironbreakers for an elite sort of spine to this dwarf build. And that's it, so let's get things rolling. We'll take a nice wide view initially as this big clash unfolds. So something really critical here to note is the Ulthar's Raiders. Rangers with Grapens, most people don't realize their missile damage is hilariously high. Not to mention this regiment renown specifically has this debuff, which debuffs missile resistance armor. Will definitely help the Quarrelers perform much better as they shoot Imric. But right now, if we can take a look at the targeting here, they're spreading their fire around a little bit, trying to get rid of threats. Warlion's leadership is not all that spectacular. And they're going to rout off with a decent amount of HP here. One of the reasons I think why they tend to underperform in most cases. You really have to babysit them quite a bit, but right now they're just struggling to get through. The High Elf build's relatively tall and narrow. Imric costs quite a bit. He's going to have to do some serious heavy lifting in order to win out here. But let's get in close as Imric unleashes a breath attack, starts to break up this dwarven formation. Certainly, dwarfs' lack of mobility leaves them vulnerable to disruption, which is why, obviously, one of the reasons why chariots are so good against them, because you can disrupt their formations, pull them out of position, get their units in positions where you can rear charge them. They're not getting their bracing bonus. Here, the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers move in. Their bracing bonus, their charge defense, massive melee defense as well. They're not going to take much damage at all from Imric. Initially, they'll be able to grind him down for some time as the Rangers and Quarrelers unload. That said, Iron Drakes, rather, is an expensive unit to lose, and the speed of the Rangers comes into play here as they chase down these Quarrelers, although they are Quarrelers and not Rangers, so the Rangers won't be nearly as good against them. But armor will certainly come into play here. But notice how Calharmon is continuously retreating these Quarrelers, continuously pulling them back. Phoenix King trying to apply pressure, but just moving through and blocking. It looks like Dolthar's Raiders now moving in for short range. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think they're going to charge into melee, although they could, in a pinch, charge into those White Lions. Imric's also doing his best to try and charge around, but he can only be in one place at a time, and he is a very expensive Dragon Lord target, so he's going to be the target of all this focus fire. Dwarven leadership coming into play, too, as some of their units start to come back from rout. and the lack of any kind of light cavalry or units to chase off these tattered dwarfs. We see one war line coming back from route, but I don't know. We'll see if they're able to route that dwarf warrior off. These very low health war lines maybe should have been kept in reserve just to chase the routing units anyway, but kind of being thrown into combat a little bit here, they end up taking damage and getting routed off. But the Rangers are getting through. Still eventually beat the Quarrelers, and especially with the support of Imric in melee, it's going to be a tough time. But the High Elves are running low on ground troops. Besides this one unit of Rangers, actually, most of the rest of their ground units are fairly well tattered. We've got like one White Lion here, kind of getting punished in an uphill engagement against Dwarf Warriors. This map has changed quite a bit, and a lot of people don't realize, but it's a fairly extreme slope, which is going to give the Dwarfs a decent advantage. I forget exactly all the modifiers, but just know that they have an advantage in combat there. Again, Imric trying his best to ping-pong between these different targets, but Kalharmon's been doing a really good job in not allowing his Quarrelers and Rangers to get all blobbed up, making sure to keep them spread out, even as he does kind of pull them back and attack. Obviously, this one's routing off, so we'll come back, but what this does is create, multiple fields of fire, so wherever Imric charges, he's going to be shot from other directions, right? A little bit of blasting charges. Friendly fire on those Quarrelers, but it does wreck those Rangers, marked by Ulthar there. Actually used on them, debuff that, I guess, armor? I'm not really sure. Might have been a misclick, perhaps, because they don't really need the armor or missile block chance. But anyway, at this point, the Dwarfs, again, mostly ground away at the ground force, and a lot of the Winds of Magic has been dedicated to healing Imric. If we check in on his value, he's really just not getting it done. I mean, there's a reason why you don't often see big monsters against dwarfs, right? So far, Kalharmon's had his target priority fairly decent, I will say. He hasn't been able to finish Imric off, but that's something that's very hard to do when he has consistent healing, and Phoenix King has been prioritizing that and making sure he's staying on top of it. But Imric is now heal capped, and he doesn't have any army left to support him, so it's going to be a tough situation for the High Elves here. And as much as I love to see the big dragon in play, certainly, like I said, big monsters are always a risk against dwarfs because of their excellent missile play. You really need a lot of support units in order to disrupt, and I just think the build was too narrow here. Obviously, the War Lions are not consistently effective in most battles you see them in. You can use them well if you really babysit them, but healing would have needed to be dedicated to them instead of Imric, and they would have needed to have been aggressively cycle charged, which would have then taken away micro from Imric, so it's tough to execute both. You can see Thorek charging in here with his hammer out, ready to deliver some justice. I mean, when you come into a tournament with a name like this, you're just about asking for it, but that's why they play the games, right? Anyway. Of course, this isn't meant in any, not trying to stir the pot with Phoenix King. No disrespect, of course. I'm just saying. I don't necessarily agree with your statement, and I think the game kind of shows, I mean, it's in a way a self-fulfilling prophecy, and this is true even of myself. Like, if I think that a matchup is particularly difficult, or let's take vampire counts, for example, I personally just have a terrible win rate against them, because I'm not a fan of the vampire counts. I think a lot of people don't necessarily love fighting against the dwarfs, and I can respect that, but at the same time, you've tried to play dwarfs in a tournament. I definitely have. Get punished by a very good high-level player. You understand, like, oh, okay. Maybe winning with dwarfs in higher tiers of play is difficult, but certainly, dwarfs thematically are pretty cool. They're one of the first campaigns I played in Total War Warhammer 1, actually, way back in the day. But here, they're going to carry the day, and Kalharmon evens up the series, survives another game. It wasn't an elimination game for him, remember. So he forces a game 5 now, which we will get to hopefully tomorrow if I have time to cast it. No promises. Had some stuff coming up recently, but anyway, yeah. Just great value across the board for the dwarfs, but especially on these Ulthar raiders. Again, their missile damage is very strong. A lot of people don't respect it, and also helping to support these Quarrelers, a lot of which get some, insane value as well. Again, healing Imric will inflate that a little bit, as I've said in previous videos, but some other units get punished fairly hard. The blasting charge miners, I mean, sometimes these guys can carry in a way. Here, they're a little bit of a mixed bag. Some of them pay for themselves, some of them don't. And then the Dwarf Warriors, the weapons, again, more or less what you'd want to see out of them in terms of trading, which the support from Thorek allows them to trade reasonably cost-effectively into the White Lions. And it's interesting to see kind of Imric's map-wide. I don't know, I almost think, given that Thorek is such a force in this matchup, maybe we can look at the cost of Horse Imric, honestly, because, yeah, maybe taking Imric on a horse, he retains that bonus versus large, very fast speed on the ground. Granted, he is a horse lord, so he can get bogged down relatively easily. Just allows you a little bit more funds to maybe take, like, some archers. There's no range units whatsoever in this high elf build, which I think is definitely a downside. I mean, high elf archers are one of the most cost-effective units on their roster. Outranged dwarven crossbows, I believe. Let's go ahead and just get into that real quick, because the rest of this build is really not spectacular. I mean, most of these units do not pay for themselves. The White Lion infantry are fairly solid in this matchup, though. I mean, certainly, definitely on the right track there, but I think, yeah, the Imric Dragon Lord is just such a risk. I do respect the pick, definitely, but it's just such a risk in this matchup. On the other hand, if we take a look at Imric here, let's see, here he is. Okay, so, yeah. I mean, on horseback, he is quite cheap, and you can come in here and get Dragonhorn and have him just run around. Maybe you retain Lord of Dragons if you really want him to try and snipe, because anti-large armor piercing, still very good stats, decent speed. He can run around and try and attack Thorek directly, like in combat, and without him being up on a dragon, he's not nearly as much of a target. Save yourself a significant amount of funds with which to come in here, and I mean, that's enough to grab, what, 2 or 3 archers? Yeah, so I think that would be much more beneficial. Maybe get some Lyrian Reavers, chase routing units, or go after an artillery crew if they choose to bring it, although I do like the Dwarfs' counter rush strategy here, and I have to hand it to Call Harmon again. Dwarfs require certain skills, positioning, target priority, and he executed those very well here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this one. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.